Here, oh, you got it. Okay.
Well,
hey, everyone.
Never mind. Just start your show.
Thank you. Okay. Everyone, welcome back to KU Live. We got about 2 shows left this semester. The time right now is about 2:02 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's kind of a bit of a dreary day up, but we're going to, make that a little better and brighten your day a little with some nice talk radio. I've got, it's our last time, unfortunately, but our friend Nick Lawrence from WEEU is here to talk about. We have a lot of issues going on in the world right now. And we really want to hear everyone's thoughts. We got, 2 shows left this semester. This is my last semester doing the show. I would love to have 2 great shows, and I know that I'd love to hear from my listeners that listen every week. So first off, Nick, thank you very much for coming on as always.
Steve, always good to be here. I appreciate you inviting me back to do this. It's a lot of fun to be here with you and talk about these topics that we want to discuss today.
It's been a pleasure having you here and really helped me expand myself as a radio host.
Thank you. That's nice of you to say.
Appreciate it. Okay, well, the big story right now, we have a lot of things. Nick and me talked about this before the show. We talked about how these 5 St. Louis Rams players who protested in the beginning of a game this weekend, 5 of them, Tavon Austin, Stedman Bailey, Jared Cook, Chris Givens, and Kenny Britt, all skill players, walked on the field and raised their palms in the air, demonstrating the hands up, don't shoot gesture that protesters in Ferguson have been using for months. And, that sparked widespread reaction across social media. The blogosphere exploded. And a lot of, there was a statement released by the police department there, and let's see if we can find this. And what they said basically is they said something, I'm going to paraphrase around this, that they said basically that the quote-unquote thugs, they did use the word thugs as a little strong language, don't really pay all the, advertisement for the NFL, people like the policemen do, and they don't really appreciate them, showing that gesture. But, Nick, I just have to ask you, how do we know that really was pointed towards Ferguson? I mean, I know that the signs are there. It's in St. Louis. It's, right in wake of what happened with the verdict. What do you think?
I think that's probably. I mean, I don't think anybody doubts that it is because of the Ferguson thing, but it was at least it's inferred in one way or another. But the facts of the grand jury point to the opposite of that. The grand jury didn't say that Michael Brown had his hands up and the policeman shot him, and yet people are making so where's the source of the information where these guys take what happened, what the actual facts of the grand jury circumstances were, and assume that he, by putting their hands up, that the policeman shot him with his hands up. Somebody's distorted this someplace, right?
Oh, it's been completely distorted in the whole testimonies there, and this is a whole separate issue, I know, but we've heard from the reason that the verdict was given was because there were just none of these really testimonies lined up. They were all so confusing and inconsistent. So they, and according to law, you can't really, indict someone if there's not a clear, conclusion that he broke the law or violated his rights as an officer. Mm-hmm. So right now they had no choice, and that issue is. I understand there's been a lot of, protests to that. I don't think anyone really agrees with the methods they're using. I don't think anything like that warrants the rioting they've been doing and looting especially. But this is just showing we had another issue along with this. It's just the tip of the iceberg. We had Democratic representatives made the same motion on the House floor. The Congressional Black Caucus took over the House floor for an hour last night to discuss the shooting on Ferguson resident Michael Brown. And Democratic Representative Hakeem Jeffries began his remarks by simply saying, "Hands up, don't shoot." And that's the rallying cry of people all across America who don't like police violence. And that was one New York lawmaker said. And then an Ohio Representative Marcia Fudge called the grand jury's decision not to indict Brown. They called it, quote, yet another slap in our face. And that just brings up a question that I really would like to talk about with Nick and our listeners out there. Do you believe that due to the fact that there's so many racially driven shootings that anytime it involves, a white cop shooting a black kid or something like that, do you believe that they always perceive it as a matter of race because of how it's happened so many times?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the way it's portrayed, Stephen. How do we get any of our information? We get our information through the media, right?
Through what we're doing now.
Right, exactly. And we're commenting on stories that we've read that are either in print or we've heard them on other news sources. So I think the media has a role to play in how they portray the story as to how people are going to respond to that. I'm not saying the media is to blame for this by any means, but the way they slant it. The way they slant it or spin it or report it makes a difference in how people are going to react to it. You mentioned the point earlier about the headline itself. if the headline is explosive, people take the headline. Many people will not even go beyond the headline. Say, well, you see what happened? This is what the headline says.
They walk by and say, oh, I see. All they have to do is put white officer shoots unarmed black kid, which is true. That's what happened. But instead of saying 18-year-old Michael Brown shot by Darren Wilson, they spin it that way. So it's still true. It's not, illegal or false. It's just it's slanted towards a way. And that's not completely objective. It's trying to incite, some kind of, response from people.
Well, it's a business, isn't it? So what's their role? Their modus operandi, their reason for being is to sell newspapers or to sell advertisement for those newspapers or for TV and radio shows. So whatever they can do to raise revenue for their media source, they're going to do. I'm not saying they're disingenuous about it, but at the same time, their underlying motivation is to make money. Otherwise, they're not going to be on the air. They're not going to make a paper. Right?
I don't even think it's an underlying. I understand that. I'm entering a field that it's a business. It's just what I wonder about is I'm an aspiring journalist myself, and I'll be graduating after this year, entering a field that in essence I feel at times is corrupt in a way. And I don't mean that I'm not going to start going on a long list of diatribes about that, but it's just you see that it's about ethics sort of go under the mat, while then what comes into the forefront, it becomes just making money, not caring if, hey, we're an entertainment-based industry. We make money off of this, but then we stir the pits of discord with something like this. It's really, it's a slippery slope.
Well, you can think of people like Bill O'Reilly or Rush Limbaugh. Those guys, they portray things in such a strong fashion. And even Limbaugh says, he is the truth detector.
Oh, I know.
So he spins that comical. Like that, and so people believe that because an authority figure that they accept says a particular statement. They accept it because that particular person said it. They're not even questioning the veracity of what's being said, but it's the source of who's saying it, which shows you how much people tend to follow whatever they perceive as the truth, whether it's the truth or not.
Or the loudest or the biggest talking heads.
Right, exactly. But it's sad, though.
Yeah, I mean, for all we know, these guys may not even agree with some of the stuff that they're told to say by Rupert Murdoch and these other people.
There you go. That's an interesting point.
They twist their arms, and they're thinking, hey, these are the ratings. This is how much money we're making. I'm not going to start doing that and start cutting my salary. I mean, I understand no person would do that, but there has to be a way to find some common ground where you can say, all right, the media can say this is what happened. Either way, it's going to draw tons of traffic, and people can find out. If you give all the solid facts in the articles, whether it's newspaper or anything else, if they read, okay, officer shoots person in the facts, if they read, and they choose to read through probably the first two paragraphs, they'll say, okay, a white cop shoots a black kid. You don't have to put that in the headline because then it makes it sound like it's racially driven.
Right. Well, once the thing happened, I mean, there were a lot of terrible things that happened around the Michael Brown case. He was lying on the sidewalk, I guess, for a long period of time. Nobody really attended to. So there's a lot of injustice right from the very beginning, let alone trying to understand exactly what happened. As you said earlier, the amount of testimony was so confusing. There were people who were diametrically opposed to other people as to what they saw. So it makes you think you really can't trust the judgment of what we call an eyewitness. Yet we use that as a basis a lot of times for the conviction of somebody, or at least the arresting of that person. I mean, it's just amazing to me that we can't rely on a testimony because people see things through their own filters rather than actually what took place.
Right. What they saw a bunch of different stories. I mean, anytime I did this, this is what the thing about testimonies. I did this test back in high school for criminal justice class. It was shocking. I don't know, we were having class, and then all of a sudden, two guys dressed up in masks come in and start wreaking chaos, throwing stuff at the wall, knocking stuff off the desk, and then running outside. It was all about 20 seconds.
Okay.
Then after that, he said, okay, I want all of you guys to write down what you saw, every detail. I saw 18, 19 different stories. Meaning, and if you see something even more worse, or you see someone getting shot,
right,
people are going to be so shocked they're going to forget some of these details, and then it just leads to a bunch of different testimonies. Are the testimonies really that powerful in the legal system here? Because we saw so many conflicting, positions by both sides that I said, oh, wait, now first you say this, and then, wait, no, first you were here when this happened, you were in this position, and then it just becomes, all right, well, we have too much, it's too many gray lines. We can't really convict anybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, the standard for the grand jury is what I think is in question. In other words,
right,
for a grand jury to go ahead to let something go to trial, it's just a probable cause standard. Where in an actual jury trial, it's based on beyond a reasonable doubt, okay? So the standard is so low in a grand jury, and I think people are upset because with that low standard, wouldn't it have made sense to let this case go to trial to get at the truth? But then you heard the prosecutor say, "Well, no, it wasn't enough information even to suggest probable cause to go to trial," which is, I think, where people see the injustice there.
Right, probable cause. Where do you draw that? Where was his probable cause to shoot? And I think he had some probable cause to take some action. But one other thing, and this is a little. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but it's one thing I forgot to mention is that I've talked to a lot of people about this. They think that, and you thought about this. Did he have to use deadly force? I mean, I know, believe me, you put your hand, I firmly believe that Michael Brown reached for Darren Wilson's weapon. And if I were a cop, I think, okay, now like I'm on DEFCON 5,
right.
It's you and me. But then he runs away. He's not, you're not exactly, fight or flight is kicking in. But then if he's supposedly running away, then turns around and charges at you.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, plus we learned all the time about the high level of training that policemen get.
Right.
Okay, I'm assuming that part of that training includes how not to overreact in a circumstance that could be doubtful in some way. I mean, I understand, the idea of stand your ground, self-defense. The policeman can't wait to react because it could be something. The other person could be using deadly force. But I don't think that was the case in this particular situation.
And how do you simulate that? You can't simulate all these situations.
Right, exactly.
There's no way to do that. And a lot of cops think, oh, well, I used my weapon in this simulation. Oh, but, I don't really actually get hurt if, I fail. They just say, oh, no, that's bad. Try it again. Yeah. You can't really simulate that.
I think we forget sometimes that before anything, we're all human beings. I don't care what role you play. A doctor is a human before he's a doctor. A policeman is a human before he or she is a policeman. We play these roles thinking that becomes who we are, but actually our humanity takes over in most of these cases. And I don't know Darren Wilson. I don't know what he was like growing up. I don't know what his psychological profile was. We don't know any of that stuff.
And they can't. That's why they can't say this was a matter of race, because they think, all right, well, say if we always say all these hypothetical situations. What if it was white killing? What if the person who attacked him was white?
Right.
Okay, so you got someone 3 inches and 70 pounds heavier than you, being physical and aggressive and attacking you and reaching for your weapon. Mm-hmm. If I see something like that and I'm Darren Wilson, says charging at me, I'm gonna, I'm defending myself. I'm saying, sorry, you're coming at me. I'm a cop. You can't do that. Mm-hmm. And like you said, though, you could have maybe shot him in the leg, but I think, he said he was very close, and he just fired the first piece of him that he saw, and it happened to be his head. But I also thought, what about using a taser? He didn't have a taser. I don't think they issue tasers there. Mm-hmm. And you think, is there a better way to subdue somebody instead of shooting? Because, if you attack a police officer, it's something like, all right, well, I'm going to often protect the police officer in this case. I think that we should take, regardless of how sketchy his story may be, you look at, okay, well, wait, so they said that, so in his testimony, Mr. Wilson had his window down going up to these people saying, excuse me, and I talked to you, and like, oh, you were setting yourself up. That's not procedure. You're supposed to keep your distance for a little, roll it down a little.
Right.
But regardless of, even if you made a mistake there, that doesn't warrant somebody to punch you when they have physical evidence of that and attack you and, get aggressive with you.
Well, that's what makes these stories. I mean, they make them so difficult. It's even like we go back to the Trayvon Martin case. It wasn't the police per se involved. The George Zimmerman was, but the whole thing about what Zimmerman perceived, right?
Yeah, it wasn't even about that. And I believe Zimmerman should have been, he wasn't racial, but he still profiled someone as a thug.
Absolutely, yeah.
Regardless of race. He should have, I don't know how that happened.
Well, he said, well, he didn't think that Trayvon Martin had a right to be in that neighborhood. What does that mean?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't walk through any neighborhood you want to walk through?
You can't be in my neighborhood, so I'm going to follow you.
I mean, my neighborhood? I mean, you understand, it's like...
It's not private property.
There's so many issues that happen. Now, we don't want to make them racial, but it's hard to see that there's not some form of a racial component to these things.
Right, and that's what the media often does. And that's what I like to think. Do you think that, hey, we're members of the media. We know that sometimes there's a little, it's about making money. Do you feel like the media discards, the standard ethics, and do they believe the media discards ethics for profit? Mm-hmm. That's what I'd like to hear from our listeners. Anyone listening, just feel free to call in at 610-683-4859. That's 610-683-4859.
So, Steve, should the media have a social or an ethical conscience?
Right.
And should they? Is that their role? And it's the same thing with the question with the football players from the Rams.
Right.
Should they
take a political stance?
Should they take a political stance? And if they do, then how do we hold them to a different standard? Should they just totally not be involved in it? There's so many things. It's like the NFL commissioner with the Ray Rice case. There's all these things. What do we expect out of all these organizations? Okay, so the National Football League represents football players and football teams,
and majority of them are African American.
African Americans. Okay, but should they be separate from any political thing? It's like the church, like a priest in a Catholic church, or a minister, or a rabbi. Should they take political stances when they're supposedly preaching the Word of God? It's all these same. It's the same element across the board, and just in different areas. Right.
Right. And I think that the one thing that they really I'm pretty sure they took their position on it. They took took a very contrarian position on this because of how he was indicted because there was lack of evidence that he really did put his hands up. Right. And they have evidence that he was shot from the front. I read this in The Guardian, that forensic team got on evidence that the bullet went through his head at an angle as if his head was down. Okay. And if someone's putting their hands up, they wouldn't be leaning over. They'd be like leaning back saying, "Here are my hands." And so it was clearly went through the front, meaning he was not turned around. He didn't shoot him while he was running. They've obviously deducted that. Yet that's the only thing they're thinking is, did he have his hands up? And there's so many testimonies that are really, I think the case suffered because of it. I think that having testimonies can almost hurt at times. You shouldn't have as many.
Yeah,
it just dilutes it.
Exactly what it is. We know anybody who ever was a kid played Whisper Down the Lane, just like the thing you said about, that took place in your criminal justice class in high school. How can everybody see the same thing, come up with a totally different conclusion, and then trust the outcome of that testimony?
And then people keep telling people, and then they say people perceive it different ways. We're beings like that. Before you know it, you keep Whisper Down the Lane. It becomes like, someone said one little minor joke. Before you know it, it's like, this person killed somebody because the story keeps changing. It's like that. It's awful.
It's very awful because we tend to want to say, well, I'm being objective here. Human beings are not objective.
Not always. And journalism should be. But we'll take a quick commercial break. Stay tuned for more KU Live.
It's Telescopic Topics, a look into the world above us.
Although it might not seem like it, Mars is more than just a barren wasteland of smooth red rock. Valleys, mountains, plains, volcanoes, and gullies cover its surface. In fact, Mars is home to the highest mountains and deepest valleys within the solar system. Its highest mountain, Olympus Mons, stretches 3 times as high as Mount Everest, while its deepest system of valleys, the Valles Marineris, are roughly 6 times as deep as the Grand Canyon, and run close to the width of Africa in length. These Earth-like landforms can't help but beg the question, what formed these massive geological features? Scientists believe the valleys on Mars were formed from the rifting of the planet's crust as it got stretched. However, some of these valleys, channels, and gullies contain sediment layered within them, suggesting that flowing water not only existed on Mars, but could have helped create these geological features. The many mountains and volcanoes on Mars were formed by hot spots of lava that seeped to the surface and hardened to create massive mountains and shield volcanoes. These mountains are believed to be bigger than those on Earth due to the low gravity and high eruption rates of volcanoes. Very limited tectonic plate movement on Mars also keeps the hot spots and crust stationary. This ensures that the lava always flows up in the same area to create massive volcanoes over time. There are so many of these volcanoes on Mars that there are actually separate volcanic provinces. The Tharsis province is where the Olympus Mons is located, which was formed from one single hot spot that was active for thousands, if not millions of years. Tharsis also features Alba Mons, the largest volcano in our solar system by area. It was formed by multiple, extensive hotspots, giving it a very large area and unnaturally small slopes. The Elysium province contains 3 main volcanoes, Elysium Mons, Hyades Tholis, and Albert Tholis. This province also contains large channels running through its edges, containing layers of sediment, which supports the idea that the channels were formed from a large release of groundwater. This shows that the formation and structure of the geological features on Mars and Earth are very similar. I'm John Freeman, and this has been The Red Planet.
Telescopic Topics, a look into the world above us. Stay tuned to KUR for more telescopic topics, and for more information or to hear the segment again, click on the telescopic topics icon on the KUR website at www.kutztown.edu/KUR. Telescopic Topics is a production of the KU Physical Sciences Department and is recorded by the KU astronomy students in the studios of KUR. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
KUR, the radio voice of Kutztown University. KUR, Kutztown. Hey everyone, welcome back to KU Live. The time right now is about 2:22 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Steve Majiri, and we have a really informative show this week. This week we've got our friend Nick Lawrence from WEEU here. We've also got a lot of topics we've been talking about. We've been talking about what the five St. Louis Rams players did this weekend to sort of symbolize the hands up, don't shoot gesture, which has been permeating throughout the whole nation about this in wake of the whole Darren Wilson verdict. And also, we've also been talking about another issue where Tamir Rice, a young 12-year-old boy, was shot because he had a toy gun with him, and he was shot by a white cop. And the media's been really slanting this way. And actually, my producer, Mike, said over the break he had something he wanted to bring up. Mike, care to share?
Well, I'm not sure if this would help. We're talking about George Zimmerman in Florida. This probably wouldn't have helped down there much because George Zimmerman was, a neighborhood watch guy, and I'm sure he wasn't equipped with a certain technology. But President Obama had an interesting comment yesterday talking about how he thinks that a lot of this he said, she said sort of stuff that goes on after incidences like this could be possibly curtailed if all police officers were required to wear badge cams, much like those dashboard cams. Now, having them all carry a little camera, lens in their badge that records everything. So,
right.
It goes right back to the force, so that it can't be doctored by the officer or anything, and everything is right there. And I was looking at an interesting study that Newsmike.com reported. In February 2012, the city of Rialto, California, had 70 police officers take part in a controlled study in which they were required to wear a tiny badge camera that filmed their interactions with the public. In the first year of the camera's introduction, complaints against Rialto police officers fell by 88%, while use of force by officers fell by almost 60%. The cameras cost as little as a tenth of the price of a standard-issue firearm. So, interesting statistics right there. Is badge cams the solution to a lot of these he said, she said problems?
So, yes, you're thinking that cops will act differently if they're being filmed.
Maybe.
I think they do. I mean, I've watched cops. I think cops sort of conduct themselves in a very civil manner, unless, of course, they get a little violent. But I just think that, and my dad's also brought that up. My dad, if you're listening, I love you, but he's told me this, that cops act differently if they're going to be filmed because then people can use it against them. But think about the situation that Michael Brown was in. First off, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Oh, these testimonies are nuts. You have, tangible evidence of what happened. But if your life's put in danger, if I were a cop, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care if was being filmed. Someone's trying to take my life if they're putting their hand on my weapon and getting real combative and punching me, coming up to my car.
But was the evidence that tangible? Because to this day, if you still look at all the testimony from all the different people they interviewed, that still conflicts. It
does. Some people say, oh, he drove up to them. Some people said they were walking in the middle of the street.
NPR posted a great graphic last week where it broke down 24 different tests. They didn't give any names. It was just testimony 1, testimony 2, all the way through 24. And the question they asked and the answers they got, and each one was split in half. Half the people said this, half the people said he did that. So who do you believe?
Right.
Well, it's interesting, too, Mike, that C-SPAN, before they were covering Congress, the sessions in Congress, representatives acted one way. After C-SPAN, they play to the camera.
There you go.
So it works not only in the police department, where it works in any place where people think that they're being filmed. They're either going to act, they're going to be more outgoing, as let's say the theatrics that happen in Congress, or they're going to be less reactive. Or if we're talking about policemen, I think that if the amount of accusations is down, policemen are probably hesitant to act as quickly on something as they would have been had they not been filmed.
Right. And I think, well, just in this situation, though, it's very different. If you have a regular routine traffic stop, and a lot of cars actually do have that. It's different than just, having someone reach for your weapon, because that says one thing. Right. You're reaching for a weapon, then it's like saying this guy is trying to either threaten me or possibly kill me. It goes out the window. I wouldn't care if I had a camera on me. And if, a cop really believed he was doing the right thing, he'd say, all right, well, the camera's filming it. It'll expunge me of anything.
I look at it this way. It might be kind of a cynical way to look at it, but I mean, you, me, and Nick, as common day citizens, we're getting filmed everywhere we go. Exactly. I mean, you walk down the street, there's cameras watching us. We go into the gas station, cameras. Traffic light cameras taking pictures of your license plate if you run the light. I mean, if it's good enough for us, I mean, I think everybody.
It's a public place.
It's a public place. Everybody should get filmed.
It's a shame it has to come to this.
Yeah.
But it is necessary. So think about this. Let's suppose we had cameras 25 years ago on policemen. How many crimes would how many things would not have been happened? How many people perhaps wouldn't have been, declared guilty because they really do? I mean, how many would we have witnessed any police brutality? How much of that would not have happened?
I think there'd be a lot less.
You know what I mean? So it's probably the time has come for this. It's a shame that it has to be.
I agree with the president. I think it's a great idea.
I love President Obama's insight. He's a very smart man, and that's probably the best way to solve it, because we see going back to the story about Tamir
I wouldn't
Rice.
solve it. I mean, because like I said, the Florida case, Zimmerman's not going to have a camera on him. He was what was he? He was a town watchman
for police, not not vigilantes, but for policemen.
Right. It'd be a help. It'd be a huge help.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because police brutality gets you. The reason a lot of police brutalities have had issues. What was for some reason I'm drawing a blank. It was
Rodney King.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Rodney King. Could you imagine how different that would have been if those cops had cameras?
Exactly.
Then wouldn't even be talking about it. It'd be,
imagine how different it wouldn't have been hadn't it been for that one person who filmed what happened.
Yeah.
And
if you have it on there, you get a first-person view. You're thinking, all right, this is what the police officer's looking at. And these stuff, I don't know how they do it. They get it on YouTube. They can bury these policemen if they do that. And that's why some cops are thinking, all right, now I got to be really worried. And, as unfortunate as it is, they're thinking, all right, well, think about it. Just be aware that, they're catching every every action you take while on your workday out there. Good.
And I was going to say, is it possible, Steve, though, that the camera will work the other way around? In other words, if policemen are hesitant to accuse somebody or to stop them or arrest them, will then crimes will there be more crime as a result because they're afraid to be hauled into court themselves because they arrested somebody?
It's more paperwork.
Probable cause, suspicion. We talk about the stop and frisk laws in Philadelphia and in New York City. I mean, those things. They're all going to come into question now if we're going to use cameras and everything. Which so we can see both sides of the story.
Well, as with anything, I mean, you've just got to do a pros and cons sort of thing. And I thought of the same thing, Nick, and I was going to mention it. But I think that in this case, given the implications of something as serious as someone's life, I think the pros of cameras outweigh the cons.
Mm-hmm.
I really do.
With all the issues
if somebody has to do more paperwork or somebody gets hauled into court, okay,
it's better. It's justice.
Yeah,
that's justice. And another thing we mentioned is how. Just going back to this story, we were also talking about this, Mike, that, the media sometimes slants it this way. That's just to sort of change the subject a little. We also love to hear your thoughts on anything we've been talking about. Feel free to call in at 610-683-4859. That's 610-683-4859. We talked about, Nick and me talked about how the media really slants it. They maintain the truth, yet they somehow take an angle. I don't know, that may sound contradictory, but just to read the language here. Just one little excerpt from it. It says the video. This is from this was the Washington Post. Yeah, the Washington Post.
This is the Tamir Rice, the 12-year-old?
Right, Tamir Rice. And it says the video's release, I'm quoting verbatim, the video's release comes after days of protests in Cleveland centered on Tamir's death and also responding to the grand jury decision in the shooting of unarmed teenager Michael Brown in Ferguson by a white officer. So they're not saying Darren Wilson. They're not saying that. They're just saying white officer. And then, they say also in here that, Michael Brown is black. So they automatically throw those words in there of color, race, and in this they don't need it. Like you said, Tamir it's generally a name oriented towards people. It's an African name. It's not really seen as much in other cultures. And that's something where people think, okay, well, I hear white cop shoots little boy named Tamir. It sounds racially driven. And in this, it was about, I'm sure everyone's read it. A lot of people have read about this. It's talking about how this little boy had a little toy gun without a red tip, and cops thought it was a real weapon. So they unload on him, and that's something you think about. All right, well, is that itchy trigger finger? Is there a better way to handle this because he's a kid? That he pointed at them, and they have video of it too. Because it basically just shows, the video shows one thing distinctly: police officers reacted quickly, and that was a statement. The family, that was a statement from the family who, called on the family to remain calm on that.
So who gets responsibility for all these things, though, Steve, when you think about it? Because so the kid has a BB gun, okay? I guess you have to be 18 to get a BB gun.
Yes,
right?
you do.
Okay, so he's only 12 years old. So now,
got him this?
So I gotta say, so is the family responsible? And now there's a tragedy that takes place. Are the manufacturers of these guns responsible? They make them as realistic as possible, so the kid gets killed. We go down the list of who does society take any responsibility for what happens to young people? Because if you go to the Toys R Us or one of these places, go down the aisle where they sell boys' toys. A lot of violent stuff is in there.
You'll see people get pulled over for holding a simple plastic toy that doesn't even shoot anything.
This is what I'm saying. See, so who gets responsibility? The consequence is that young people are getting killed.
Yeah.
Are we all on some level responsible for the violent society we live in? How many movies are put out that are R-rating just because of the level of violence, not because of sexual content? And yet we glorify that stuff. People watch football every week, and I listen to the commentators. They love when these guys make these incredible hits. Well, I mean, that's a form of violence. Or society's perpetuating this, and then when somebody gets killed as a result of it, we're looking for a scapegoat. We're looking for somebody to blame for it. Well, maybe on some level we all have something to do with this.
We gravitate towards violence. Michael Bay has exploited that with his explosion and gun shooting filled movies.
It's kind of interesting how in America we can have Janet Jackson have a, quote, wardrobe malfunction,
right.
and it's the topic of the news for 10 years, yet we can watch people get, bloodied up and sliced and diced on television, and nobody thinks twice.
Right. You'll see people
get shot. Are our priorities a little backwards?
Yeah,
maybe?
There's a statistic, I don't know what it is, maybe we can look at it before the end of the show, that says from the time a child is born till they're 18, the number of murders that they've witnessed, virtual murders on TV or in movies and things like that. And then if you add in things like Grand Theft Auto and some of these video games where it's a constant barrage of killing, right? And then we think, well, but it doesn't affect anybody.
Yeah, well, it can.
Yeah.
People have. I remember I read a story when I was younger. Someone shot someone and murdered someone. Said he was encouraged of that by the Matrix.
Right.
He went out and thought he was, Neos going to, shoot Mr. Agent Smith. And it's ridiculous that these people will shoot. I think it's the reason that happens is, like you said with Tamir Rice, is they're exposed to it when they're too young. I see violent movies. I don't think about going out and my parents really made sure to keep me away from that stuff. I couldn't watch a PG-13 movie till I was 13. Exactly, not 12.
And the difference today, Steve, is when even probably when you were a kid, but actually more in Mike's and my generation. Mike's younger than I am, but you could watch something and you only watched it once. It wasn't available over and over and over and over and over again.
True. Right.
You know what I mean? So, and cap guns, people used to play cops and robbers, and they played cowboys and Indians. Okay, but it wasn't the same as this. It wasn't realistic violence that we see in a virtual world.
Grand Theft Auto, you're encouraged to basically kill. You probably, if you somehow count it, you probably kill over 1,000 people over the story of the game.
There you go.
You can do whatever you want, and you can get away really easily. And some people are dumb enough to think that they can get away with this. Wow. So all I have to do is, if this happens, I just get in the car and get in the plane and fly away.
And in defense of, I'm not a video gamer, by the way, but in defense of video gamers, just so we can play it fair, I know that video gamers will get very adamant about this, and they'll be like, well, just because I play Grand Theft Auto doesn't mean I'm a psycho killer. Well, that's true, but maybe if you're dealing with people that have some inherent issues or stuff, who's to say that couldn't trigger certain things in them?
Plus, if we talk to any language professor, that the key to getting a person to learn a foreign language is repetition.
Right.
So, and the more often you see an image, whether it registers consciously in your brain or not, the more it has a potential to come out at some point. If repetition didn't matter, if information didn't change behavior, Kutztown wouldn't exist. There would be no colleges or schools if information didn't change behavior.
It changes the whole scale of pedagogy in that area.
Of course.
Yeah, and another thing about gaming, well, I don't know if this really relates to it, but I want to sort of talk about this. What do you think about, we'll bring up back to the discussion about the whole police issue. Because, yes, gaming hurts them, and some cops think, all right, well, they're very against these games. They don't think that, kids should get their hands on them, that, parents shouldn't buy them for them. And we're thinking, all right, what's a 12-year-old doing with a BB gun that can shoot a pellet and take someone's eye out, and that looks real? And it shows, okay, so why would they get that for him? Where do he get his hands on it? Is it the parent, like you're saying, is this the parent's fault? Is it the policeman's fault for being too violent? Is it the kid's fault for not thinking, okay, I'm 12, I'm not a complete idiot. I see a cop coming up to me who has, probably his hand on his weapon. I'm thinking, any person would think, okay, maybe I should, just let the policeman, do that. It's a very sketchy issue, and I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts. Feel free to call into the show at 610-683-4859. That's 610-683-4859. We'll take a quick commercial break. Stay tuned.
Did you know that 80% of KU students don't binge drink?
Hanging posters again? Do you think that poster is really true?
Yes, it is true. I am a KU health ambassador and familiar with the audit. KU students participate in alcohol screening each year. We use the alcohol use disorder identification test. It is a simple way to screen and identify people who are at risk of developing alcohol problems. We have learned that the majority of students are taking care of business and focusing on academics.
Most of my friends don't drink, so I guess what this poster is saying is true.
Would you like to get a group of friends together for a bite to eat?
Sounds great. Text me later.
Kutztown Living, neighbor to neighbor.
Funded by the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board.
The moment she sees you, she gets excited. She can hardly control herself. She runs to you and jumps into your lap. You stroke her back. She licks all over your face. You rub her stomach. She pants heavily. Then she jumps down and runs off. She turns and tilts her head. She barks. She returns and lays at your feet. She whimpers. Then she darts off again. She probably wants you to chase her. She doesn't know you can't play like you used to. Because she doesn't know you're paralyzed. See, you didn't think you needed a seatbelt just to drive up the road. Then that truck ran that stop sign and bam, you got thrown from the car. If you had only known that most car crashes occur close to home, you would have been wearing your seatbelt. And you wouldn't be stuck in that wheelchair. And this story wouldn't have gotten all twisted. And you'd be rolling around on the floor by now. So buckle up, because you never know.
A message from the Department of Transportation and the Ad Council.
Kutztown University's Department of Information Technology recently launched MyKU Mobile, which can be accessed at mykumobile.kutztown.edu. MyKU Mobile provides a quick way for students to view grades, financial aid information, announcements, and schedules, all from your phone. The new site also integrates with social networking sites, enabling students to post their schedules on Twitter and Facebook without ever having to use a computer. Make sure to visit myku.kutztown.edu for the best way to view MyKU on your phone.
KUR, the radio voice of Kutztown University. KUR Kutztown. Hey everyone, welcome back to KU Live. Time right now is about 2:40 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm your host, Steve Mangieri. You've got our good friend Nick Lawrence from WEEU here, and we've been talking about a wide range of issues. We've been talking about the issue with Ferguson that's been going on. We talked about this last week on the show, and it's just been going on and on. There's been all kinds of protests across the country. We talked about how multiple St. Louis Rams players, gesticulated the whole hands up, don't shoot sign that's been going across America and inspiring a lot of people to rise against authority in sometimes ways that I may not agree with. And we also saw congressmen of the Black Caucus, and I believe it was the Democratic representatives of the Congressional Black Caucus who took over the House floor for an hour Monday night and basically started out by Hakeem Jeffries, a Democratic representative, said, hands up, don't shoot. And
Steve, one of the things we have not talked about is the way the announcement was made about the Michael Brown case. When the prosecutor did all of that stuff and led up to saying, well, there's no probable cause to take this case to trial. You mean they didn't know? First of all, they made the announcement at night, which was a bad thing. The businesses were not. You saw the split screen after that announcement was made. President Obama was making a statement about trying to keep calm, and you watched the split screen, and the places were burning. There was looting. I mean, so they didn't know in advance that maybe they should have had the National Guard there.
Yeah,
where were the police?
Well, there was a whole. I don't know if you guys are following this. There was a whole debate as to why it was announced at 9 o'clock our time, 8 o'clock their time, when they had an answer at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, I read that. I want to bring that up.
And there's two schools of thoughts. The first school of thought being, okay, well, we wanted to give everybody who was out on the streets chance to get home, so who didn't want to participate in any of this. We didn't want to have them innocently caught in any crossfire, so to speak. The cynical view to this, however, the conspiracy theorists are saying, is that the guy wanted primetime, publicity.
Wow.
What about the businesses, Michael? I mean, all of those and many black-owned businesses in Ferguson were looted and destroyed. I mean, they couldn't have protected against that by having the National Guard there?
Right, and that also, Ed mentions a good point that a lot of people have said this. This is a little liberal, but that makes me think that this isn't, it shows that they're not really, I don't think they really care that much about Michael Brown. They can't say, we're going here to defend, our fellow African-American who was gunned down by the officers by stealing, looting stores that are owned by African-American owners. Yeah. Some people would say, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, as I'm sitting here, there's some kind of breaking news coming over CNN about Ferguson, so very appropriate. Authorities are investigating whether Michael Brown's stepfather intended to incite a riot last week when he urged a crowd in Ferguson to, quote, burn this expletive down.
I saw that footage.
After the grand jury's decision was announced. No charges have yet been filed against Lewis in the incident, but police have interviewed people who know him and who were with him November 24th. Shortly after St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney Robert McCullough's announcement, his name is Lewis Head, stood above a crowd of demonstrators, some of them shouting, I won't use these words, and burn this blank down. So now the big story is, did he incite a riot last week? His stepfather.
Burn this expletive down sounds pretty, that sounds like something that isn't protected under the First Amendment, I'll tell you
But then again, you think about, okay, so somebody makes a statement like that. Why do people have to respond to it? Why do people have to follow it? He may have incited the riot.
It's his father. People want excuses. They want some of these people are followers. They want excuses to, do stuff like this. Some of these people, they were criminals. They wanted, and that's that strong language. But I think if you loot a store and take everything in it, you're a criminal. You're not defending anybody. I'm sorry, but that's there's no excuse.
And
for
your
that.
anger at injustice is not a good excuse. In other words, people say that the people were angry at the verdict. Well, it does, okay. So how does that interpret in destroying someone else's property? Right?
You are against an injustice done by your system, so you commit an injustice to thwart an injustice.
Right. Exactly. That's a good point.
And of course, me with my counterpoints. The counterpoint, not saying that I believe this counterpoint, I'm just throwing it out there.
Please.
The counterpoint to that is, I heard that a lot of these people that live in that area, Ferguson's a very poor, low poverty, poverty type city.
They feel like they're martyrs.
A lot of these people are trapped. They feel like they have, so what if I burn the corner business down? It doesn't matter anything to me. I'm trapped here. I'm never going to make anything more than $5 an hour anyway. So that's the counter argument to that.
But it doesn't warrant it. Does it really warrant it?
No, I don't agree it does. Yeah. I'm just saying that's what the counter argument is.
Yeah. And I don't think it's. do you think it's a strong counter argument, Nick?
Well, I don't know, because I was just thinking as you're talking that education is probably the key to a lot of this stuff. We talk about education is the key to getting out of poverty for most people. So you have a connection between poverty and lack of education. Lack of education means that people many times make bad decisions because they don't have any other information to make so it's a societal problem. It's just like the whole idea of this playing video games and guns in our violent society. It's societal. We look at it as a single an incident, but it's not an incident. It's more of a psychology, or Steve, you use the word culture in a sense.
In a way,
it's a culture of violence.
It's a culture of violence, and the stats are there. It's been going on for years. The African-American culture has been demonized by almost the police. And, often cops, they say, if they want to say, all right, you want to look for crime, go to this neighborhood. You'll see lots of, I'm not quoting, but they say you'll see a lot of African-Americans here. And cops think, okay, well then, look at all the crime rates. So we want to find crime. They base it off of race instead of by, location or neighborhood or anything. And that's led to just more and more of these crimes, and it tips the scale even more.
It's amazing. It's
racially driven in a way.
Another ironic twist of things, and I don't know if you guys see this or not, or if you see who attends church, many times the African American community, their churches are packed with people every weekend, and yet a lot of the crime, by statistics, is committed by by African Americans. I'm not blaming the group of that, but it's just an ironic twist of things that those who profess the faith the most seem to have more of the problem when it comes to committing crimes.
To commit a sin, if you look at it in that context.
It's weird, and so I have to ask, well, why is that happening? What are we doing in society where you're getting a mixed message from a particular community of people?
A minority group, from a sociological standpoint. That's a very good question Nick just posed. What are your thoughts on that? Just feel free to call in at 610-683-4859, 610-683-4859. How do you believe that, we see such a mixed message? Why do we believe that, the people of Ferguson are trying to thwart an injustice by committing an injustice? Why do you feel that some of these churches that are heavily filled with African Americans, and then you see crimes committed at a higher rate by African Americans? Do you believe it's biased by the police? There's so much going on. This is a very deep topic that's all stemmed from one story that's just been blown out of proportion because of simple words, the black and white color. Those have been in the headlines everywhere. If it were just officer shoots unarmed kid, it'd be bad, but it wouldn't have anywhere near as much. They wouldn't be thrown in the kind of ignominy that they're thrown in right now.
So, Steve, there's also the question of how people didn't accept the decision of the grand jury. So, in other words, we say we're a nation of laws, right? We live by laws. But so the grand jury comes to a decision that the people don't agree with, and therefore they choose to loot and destroy. But what about the whole idea of not trusting the grand jury? Where does that come from? In other words, we don't believe that the grand jury, people weren't honest.
Yeah, because that's one thing I've read conflicting stats about. Last week on the show, I said that Ferguson's county, their police force was 94% white, but then I heard from someone else saying that it wasn't. But then they say, all right, well, then I heard that they had a 67% black and their population was. Yeah. And then I saw that, then there were 9 whites and 3 blacks. And
I think it just boils down to a lot of, there's a common distrust of people across the board of how the system works.
Right. And in Ferguson also. It's been going on for centuries.
Michael, what if
people just don't trust the system anymore?
What if the outcome had been they would have taken Darren Wilson to trial? There wouldn't have been any of this. Would there not have been any of the looting and carrying on then, because they would have gotten what they wanted? I mean, so I don't understand how they could not have at least come with the smallest amount of proof, which would be a probable cause standard. And they couldn't even get a probable cause to get a clarification by going to jury. That's a piece I don't understand. That's the more mysterious part.
Do you feel the legal system just kind of thought this is a huge issue? We need to just kind of, not for lack of a better term, do you feel they wanted to think, all right, let's maybe try and, get this done expeditiously to make sure we find a verdict that's, that's sound, but maybe not, after doing enough homework? Do you think they maybe could have extended it a little longer? Because, I've seen some trials where it takes a year afterwards for them to get all the evidence. To this, they kind of just in 3 to 4 months, boom, we've got ourselves a verdict. And a huge case like this.
I mentioned this past week on a show that I did on WEEU that the term grand jury is strange, too. Because people think that the grand jury is a jury. It's not a jury.
Right.
It's just there to determine whether or not a case can go to actually a standard jury. So one of the callers called in and said that the grand jury is an old institution. It was called a grand jury because it was made up of many more people other than a standard 12-person jury.
And
right?
What if it's 6 and 6?
Right.
What if it's even? Mm-hmm. Who is the tiebreaker?
I just don't like that term grand jury because I think people think it's a jury in a traditional sense of the word.
Regular people.
Right.
And I'm sure they admonished them and said, you're not, make sure you don't know the person or anything like that. And I know some people who are a little conspiracy theorists think, okay, well, let's see, white cop on trial, 9 white people on the grand jury, and there are 9, they won the decision 9-3. They didn't reveal who said what, but that makes people think, okay, who do you think they went for? And I don't think there's racial bias in that. I think that, there's a reason why they go through this whole process. I learned about it in communication law, of making sure that these people have nothing to do with the person who's being indicted or put on the stand for anything. And I'm sure that they did a lot of arbitrating, a lot of discussion, and came to a good conclusion that this is what we believe in. Because if you're a member of a jury, you're just automatically going to take someone's side because they have the same skin color as you. What if that person's a scumbag? What, as a human being, how can how could they say that someone would just take the side of someone particularly because of the pigmentation of their skin, when this person could be a monster? And I know Darren Wilson, a lot of people came to his side because he has a bit of a defense in this. But that just makes you think, do people think the grand jury think there should be more than 12? Do you think there should be a larger
grand
number
juries,
of
I think, isn't the grand jury larger than 12 people?
Right, but this one was for this,
right.
for
this
smaller
particular one.
jurisdiction.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And,
And are the grand jurors put through the same process as anybody is put through when they're going to be on a traditional jury? I mean, are they questioned in advance about their perspective on things?
I don't think they are.
I don't know what the standards are. Maybe we can check that. If not for this show, Steve, maybe for the next one.
I know, I see what you're getting at, Nick, because I know if you are on a regular jury, they put you through the ringer. I mean,
Exactly.
Do you have any relatives or that do this, or anybody that believes this? Or
how did they get through this that quickly with 3 months?
Yeah,
the defending attorney and the prosecuting attorney decide who's
they
going to be on the jury, and they accept the jurors or not. I don't know if that's true for a grand jury.
Yeah, I don't know.
That true? Maybe Steve, you can see.
We can
do
check
that.
that.
We'll talk about it.
Well,
Maybe Mike, you can look that up for us while we're doing this, if possible. What are the standards to be on a grand jury rather than being on a traditional, trial jury? Things like that.
Right. And I wish we could somehow get away with how they based this. Where did they base these jurors that they found off the streets or something?
Right, that's what I'm talking about. And Steve, you raised this issue earlier about the racial balance of a town versus the number of policemen on a particular police force. If you have a 67%
majority of the population is black,
right? And so, should you have a 67% balance in your police department, and would that have made a difference? I mean, a lot of police departments are made up of white policemen in towns where there are, especially here in the Northeast, a lot of times, and even in the South, where there are a lot of towns that are primarily, or at least a strong population of blacks and Hispanics. So should the police force reflect the community that they serve, or would that not make a difference at all?
And I see where you're getting at, and I know that LAPD and like San Jose and towns with some culture in that aspect do have some cops there because they can relate, they can speak the language sometimes. But then it's like you're saying, all right, well, since we're a predominantly African American town, let's make sure the same majority of the the population is reflected in our police force. Then
what
it's
do you
almost
think
like
about that?
I can see how it may help, but then it's like, then it's like we're saying, all right, we have to make sure we hit this number. If we drop below it, then ding ding, we're in the red.
It's another indication of how racially aware we are. In other words, we can't just say somebody committed a crime. You have to identify them as a white person or a black person.
Thank the media for that.
So we're racially conscious on every level. You shouldn't have to be able to say, well, okay, if your town's black and you have white policemen, it shouldn't make a difference. But people think that it would, because we're so racially conscious, even after what? Since the slaves were freed after the Civil War.
Right. And it's the media. They're the ones who put the black and white and the racial color. Yeah. They can, of course, identify the people, hey, the person who was shot, name first, but they don't put the name first. They put the skin color of the person first, or something like this.
Steve, yeah.
And especially in the South, that's the problem. It is the South. There's a lot more racism down there, and an impoverished town like this that has a long history of it, you're going to see. Maybe these people are sick of it. Their frustration is hitting its boiling point, and they just feel like they can't get a break at times. But it's almost like they're saying, hey, this is our time. We need to fight for it. But there are much better ways to do it than that.
Apparently, the statistics do show, though, that young black men are treated differently in the criminal justice system than young white men are. Okay, so if that's the case, why is it the case? I mean, not necessarily because one group commits more crime than the other, but when someone commits a crime,
it's a matter of
why are they treated differently than any other? Justice is supposed to be blind, right?
Right.
But apparently it's not. According to
what
all the stats
say, they're not colorblind, but they still see black and white. They should be seeing nothing.
Neutral as
neutral as possible. Right? And we'd like to end the show just like, what are your thoughts on this? We've had a lot of discussion here, brought up a lot.
Are we at the end of the show already?
No, it's coming down. We've got about 5 minutes left.
Wow.
But if anyone has any thoughts, please feel free to call in at 610-683-4859. You can send, messages to us on your thoughts on this. We have another show next week coming up, and we'd love to hear from you. Your listeners, this is one of my last shows. I've really had a blast doing this show, and I also just want to say, since I've got about 4 minutes left, I want to personally thank Nick. Nick has really helped me out. He's come in and taken me under my wing. He's given me really good critique of my work. He's helped my interviewing skills. He's helped me really build this radio show to expand a lot more, because at first I was a little rigid to sort of cover the just community issues. And then I realized, I thought that just pertained to Kutztown and Maxatawny, and there's still plenty of issues that I believe we should explore. But now we're talking about national issues because, hey, we still do live in this national area. We live in this country. We have the right to, no matter how small of a municipality we are, we still have the right to actually, talk about it. And I want to thank you. I want to say thanks. I really appreciate it.
I want to thank you for having me in here to do this with you. It's been a pleasure for me to do this. This is my last show with you, and I certainly do wish you the best. I think you're growing leaps and bounds at what you're doing, and that's not a condescending statement. That's that I can see just in the short time I've been with you how much you've changed and matured. You were doing well before, but I'm really proud of what you've accomplished, and I look forward to hearing your name in the future in the media, Stephen.
I'll be sure to thank
the nationally syndicated Steve Majiri show.
That's my voice. There we go.
That would be cool.
And I'm gonna learn a lot about how this industry works. Yeah. And I thought I don't usually self-indulge, but I don't self-indulge a lot. But today's been a good day for me. I get to end on a really good radio show, and I also got some really great news that I am interning. I'm going to be interning with 6ABC WPVI this spring. I've been accepted there. Right now, that's my number one choice, and it's good to know that I'm graduating because that's. In our department, we need a full internship in the spring to graduate, and I get to learn from, in a huge market from one of the best news teams that there is out there.
Yeah, so before we leave, can I say thanks to Mike
Please.
As well, Mike Regensberger. Mike, I want to thank you for allowing me to come to Kutztown and work with Steve and any of the other people that were interested in this. It's been my pleasure to be here, and I certainly enjoy working with these great students that you guys have here.
And it's been my pleasure to have a consummate professional like yourself here, and we look forward to next semester when you hopefully mentor some new folks.
Thank you so much.
It'll be fun.
Yeah, it makes me want to stay here for another semester. But all right, we've got another show next week to end things out. We're going to try and get Dr. Vargas, our acting president, come in. We're also going to have our friend Russell from the counseling services come in to sort of help us mitigate the stress that a lot accretes when you're going through finals week. So be sure to tune in for that. We're also probably going to have our student body president. We've just got a lot of guests coming in. We're going to end on a blast on a really high note for what's been a great time hosting the show. So I'm Steve Majiri, saying signing off, and have a very nice, stay warm, and have a good day.